It probably comes up for some people, at various degrees of their life. But good question is, why are you still going headlong into this wisdom for leaders when you are the age that you are at 75?
So as I began to age, I also began to see more broadly and more ably than I have before. And certain things became obvious. And particularly in June of 2020, what I'm observing and what I'm feeling and what I'm trying to deal with, like everybody else, is the unbridled uncertainty about the future, the confusion that's going on, the emotional fear and anxiety, and the anger that's present. The thing that saw for myself is if leaders could expand their wisdom, they'd be far more able to handle the conditions in which they're moving into, in which their people are moving into. So it seemed at age 75, I've gotten some wisdom, and I now understand how to move the knowledge that people have and that's available out there into wisdom. Wisdom for me, Tim, is seeing the whole rather than the parts. It's doing the right thing at the right time in the right way. Wisdom lets you alter your business and your personal context and conditions. Wisdom allows for some potency in areas where you feel impotent. So what I thought, it would make a profound difference to bring greater wisdom to the leaders today so they could handle their stuff and ultimately make the world work a little bit
decided
better.
Hey, let's just start again at 75. I'm going to start another thing. I'm like, let's go. I like it.
Yeah.
So Mark, you talk about, or Dr. Cooper, excuse me, you talk about wisdom a lot. What would you say, and you talk about some of the conditions that allow wisdom to kind of come forward, but what would you say wisdom is, if you had to? I know that's a very broad question, but it seems to be relevant.
It's a perfect question. So wisdom is experiential in lots of ways. You know when you're around someone with wisdom. There's something about that aura that that person has that generates safety and a world of sanctuary a bit, and open communication and non-judgment. There's just a lot of things that you experience. But if you want to define wisdom, it's very simple, yet it's quite complex. Wisdom is the ability to think and act using knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, and insight. And one of the things that our company does, which we've moved to being somewhat masterful about, is we know that the conversion formula to take knowledge to wisdom is the generation of insights. And our entity can be able to generate those kinds of insights for people so that they actually, the leaders, get and generate more wisdom. So that's kind of how this thing works.
And maybe expanding on the question a little bit more, what would you say are some of the additional qualities of wisdom so that people could identify them more clearly?
Well, just envision a leader that you're with that provides unbiased judgment, authentic compassion, pushes for his own and yours self-knowledge of yourself, is up to some transcendence and non-attachment in the way he's living or she's living her life. And if those and that person were anchored truly to ethics and compassion, what kind of relationship, what kind of experience would be available? What kind of power would that leader have in moving people into an uncertain future? And so that's what I see wisdom is really about and what wisdom is for.
That makes complete sense. And thank you. You really outlined that well. As we look in, part of this whole thing that you're doing is wisdom for leaders and that kind of thing. When you think about leaders now, what do you see? Do you see leaders that you feel like, hey, this guy's expressing some aspect of wisdom at all?
I prefer not to make it an all or none phenomenon. There's sometimes people are leading, and sometimes they're not. So it's not either or.
Got it.
When I notice certain things in leaders, I know their wisdom is far afield. I notice that they have very biased judgments and repetitive assessments of the way it should be. They have a lack of compassion. It's more self-focused. Um, I don't hear in their speaking, I don't hear in our interaction a thirst for deeper self-knowledge and self-awareness. Um, I don't see that they want to move themselves in a more transcendence way, become bigger contributors on the planet. So I don't hear that in their speaking when they're not being the kind of wisdom leaders that we're speaking about.
Clear. So what do you think if I'm a leader and I want to do more with my leadership? What do you think would drive me or any particular leader to seek more wisdom, or to, what I guess what causes that shift, maybe, is another way of asking that. Or what could cause that shift for a leader that's maybe not on track? What would drive a leader to seek that wisdom?
The thing that I love about wisdom, that I don't want to make it into a thing, but it's to wake up. It wakes you up because, oh, I can't believe I'm doing that again. Or did I just do that? I apologize. When you see there's a certain value system that we'll probably get to in this interview that is consistent and supportive of wisdom. But when you hear the ignorance and selfishness and hate and greed and envy and some revenge, and I'm going to get him back, and I'm going to get her back, or I'm going to be better than that. What I see in wisdom is the capacity to really be empathetic. I hear truth being told. I hear honesty, justice, cooperation, peace. I hear compassion. I feel compassion. So there's just something about wisdom that allows for a level of relatedness that draws the people closer together. And what is needed, I say, to go into the future now is greater cohesion. That's the primary goal of the teams that people are putting together. And wisdom would make a profound difference in being able to create that cohesive force.
How do you think we would develop wisdom in leaders in a group, or do more to develop them? I know you kind of answered that a little bit, but do you see immediate steps?
You would have to start out with, that's a great question. This will probably go off script a bit, but what you need is to begin with, I'm responsible. If I'm pointing a finger at anything or anyone, I am making them the responsible agent. I'm faulting them or I'm blaming them. And you can't begin to move into wisdom until you say, you know what, I probably have a lot to do with this. What is it about me that may be producing that outcome? So where would have to begin is people being, as we use the phraseology, cause in the matter, source of. I am the buck that is stopping here. If you got to start there, then that's a place to begin. And then there's a certain process that you take people through to take their knowledge, that's including self-knowledge, and having them have those insights that reveal the underlying source of why those things appear the way they appear, so that people can be a choice about either I'm going to act like an asshole or I'm not. I'm either going to be a good guy or I'm not. I mean, there's some wisdom gives you an ability to have a space between the action that you'll take and the thoughts that you have, and to be able to make appropriate choices so that the outcomes are produced.
Yeah.
So wisdom gives you,
It's interesting because you kind of actually answered my next question, which was what is required of a leader to gain wisdom? And you kind of started to say it. You're like responsibility, self-awareness, a certain degree of intelligence, a certain degree of willingness to accept what you've done in that. So I think you've sort of answered that question.
Yeah.
But I actually, it's a perfect segue to the follow up, which is, what is the cost for a leader to not do these things and not seek wisdom in your mind?
Oh, well, number one, they can't get things done. And so they have to shift the role from leader to boss.
Mm.
And boss, here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Here's what I want it done by. So they'll usurp the responsible, creative, and loyal juices right out of them, and it becomes about just doing what he or she has asked me to do.
Mm.
So there's no ownership. So
Yeah.
what it costs you, I think, particularly, again, I want to restate this. We're moving into a future that's uncertain. We have no idea what this future is going to look like. What's the kind of leadership that you need to take your team into that kind of future?
Yeah.
Before you knew somewhere where you're going. So you asked me what the cost is. The costs you employee engagement, because they're going to be there because they have to be. And from our viewpoint, it's going to cost you emotional commitment. People aren't committed. It's going to be tough to move people to do different things as change occurs.
It also sounds like long term, it could cost you part of your future depending on how you play it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the broader thing. It's not to be doomsdayish, but just to look at the long term ramifications of not living your life with a certain degree of responsibility and self awareness.
This is an aside. I'm watching all these people make all this money out of this catastrophe.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh my God, I feel taking advantage is one thing that surfaces in a crisis.
Mm.
Wisdom would diminish that. See,
Yeah.
Wisdom works for good. I don't know how else to say that. In every Aboriginal culture where their elders are honored, the kind of relationships that occur within that sphere is pretty remarkable. There is family there at a whole different level, and community and tribe. I mean, wisdom brings a lot.
Yeah. Clear. Thank you. Just a couple more questions. For the leaders that you've actually worked with, what do leaders that actually have wisdom report back to you? What do they say? How do they differentiate themselves? What have you seen? And it may be the same question, but the last one is, how do you know when a leader has wisdom? So I think those two.
Well, number one, I know there's not. Oftentimes, when I meet people, there is a certain social game to play that creates a certain distance that you have to figure out how to move either closer or keep it where it is. In wisdom, that space is very tight. I mean, it's so in wisdom, you have a greater acceptance of people and who they are and what they're about. And there isn't a constant press to be right or to be better than.
Yeah.
Wisdom foregoes that. It just says, hey, man, I understand. I have that problem too.
Yeah.
It just happens to look like this in my life. So there's a relatedness that wisdom brings almost immediately to the relationships that they're in.
Wow.
So I know right away when I'm around wisdom, to answer your question, I feel that. It's just like, well, I feel welcome. I feel I feel equal. I don't feel I have to prove myself. And then the language that I use in that kind of space is much more authentic, and I could be much more vulnerable. I could be much more self-expressed. I could be much more me.
Yeah.
And I can take off my masks. So there's that kind of feeling that's occurring.
That's beautiful.
And then there's the results that occur out of that, which is legitimate requests that can be negotiated so that the outcome will be produced as mutually agreed upon. So from a business aspect, it delivers effective action.
Clear. Very clear. So I want to have one thing to kind of wrap this up. And that is, first of all, I just want to thank you for this. It's been a great time kind of getting to go back and forth and really ask these questions with you. you've said once or twice now that wisdom is mostly experiential, and we've been talking about wisdom a lot. But going away from this, what's one thing that you could say to people? Say, hey, here's something you could go do that will cultivate wisdom in your life. Having watched this, like, what's one thing you can go do right now that you're like, hey, that'll cultivate a certain degree of wisdom for you?
I love that question because I could do this for an hour. So I'm going to put on my coaching hat a little
Okay.
bit because you've asked me a kind of coaching question. I'd like people to take a look and take out a piece of paper and look at write the list of the problems that are recurring and chronic in their life. Just write those down.
Okay.
And then take a look and then draw a line. And then on the second column would be blame or fault. And next to all those chronic, what are you blaming or who are you blaming
Okay.
as a source or a contributor to that issue? And then I want you to have a third column called me. And I want you to take a look from the point of view of how are you contributing to, how are you causing this problem to persist? And then there's a fourth column is what are you getting out of it? What's the benefit?
So let me recap with you. So we're going to take out a notepad and make a list of issues, grievances, or problems in our life currently. That's going to be the first list. Second list is what's the issue or who potentially you think is causing it. Third column is me. Where do I stand in the process of it? And the fourth column again is what are you getting out of
it? Yeah. What's the benefit?
What are you?
Why are you keeping it around?
Why does it keep continuing?
If you put your hand on a hot stove, it gets burnt.
Yes.
So these people keep their hand on a hot stove, and I'd like to know they must be getting something out of it. This will, in essence, be somewhat of the process we put people through to gain wisdom so that they can look from the point of view backward of, who am I in the matter that is generating this kind of output. And once they see what they're getting out of it, once they see that there's a win here for them and they keep it for that reason, they can choose another path rather than be used by it. So in essence, then we can end with the statement, wisdom gives you freedom.
Got it. Awesome. Dr. Cooper, thank you so much for the time.
You're welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Taking the time to answer those questions. They were very thorough and very clear, at least from where I'm sitting.
Yep. Well, you're sitting where you're sitting. All right, buddy. Take care.